Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Hero Arts. In today's video, we are going to create this serene picnic scene featuring dies from the Classic and Premium July My Monthly Hero kits. We're going to start with this die here that's included in the Classic kit, and we're going to die cut it out of an A2 panel of Meadow cardstock. I'm going to kind of position it at the upper 2/3 of the panel. This just works out better for creating our scene and leaves us a little bit more space for our kind of picnic scene at the bottom. Just use Hero Arts tweezers to kind of pop out all the little negative spaces, and now we're going to move on to our next layer. I have the water here. This is one of the dies included in the premium kit. I'm going to die cut this scrap of Lapis cardstock to create this water behind our kind of forest scene or park scene. Then we're going to move on to creating a frame. I have a die here from the Nesting Rectangles Infinities die set, and I'm going to die cut a A2 panel of Dove White cardstock with this die, and now we'll have this frame to kind of narrow down our scene and just kind of complete our scene a little bit better. Now with this scrap, we're going to die cut our picnic scene. This little scene die here is also from the July Premium kit. And now we're going to color the kind of wood areas of that lounge chair there. I have two Copics here, just some light tans. Just going to quickly color all of the wooden areas on this chair with this light tan first, and then I'll move on to E31, which is my darker tan, just to kind of add some shadows here and there. It's a little bit easier to color this chair while it's kind of still attached to the rest of the scene, but we will kind of fussy cut this scene out from that kind of grass that's surrounding it. And so I'm going to grab my scissors here and just kind of cut the little pieces of cardstock that are kind of holding that kind of grass that's around our little picnic scene away from our chair, basket, and blanket. And while I'm working my way around this scene, you'll notice that cutting or removing the grass will actually detach the upper part of the chair from the blanket or its legs. And we just will hold on to that and attach that later when we construct our scene onto our card base. And here I'm almost done, just cutting that last bit of grass away from the basket. And now we're going to move on to kind of cutting out a couple little negative spaces or a little bit of negative cardstock. We have some cardstock here between the chair legs that we're going to remove. And then there's a little bit of a negative space between the basket handle as well that we need to remove. The basket handle is a little bit easier to remove with a craft knife because it's completely enclosed. So I'm just going to grab my craft knife here and just kind of cut away those two little remaining areas of cardstock that are holding that negative space there in between the handles. And once I get that free, we're ready to move on to coloring our blanket. So I'm going to grab another Copic marker here. This is B30 or B93, and I'm going to color stripes, vertical and horizontal, and that's going to make a very simple kind of gingham pattern or gingham looking pattern over this picnic blanket. I'll start with my vertical stripes here and just carefully go back and forth, trying to kind of follow the angle of the sides of the blanket. And now that I'm going to do my horizontal, again, I'm going to kind of follow the angle of the edges of the horizontal edges of this blanket, and that just kind of makes things look like it's at an angle. That pattern looks like it's at an angle and the right perspective for that blanket. And then we're going to move on to adding color to the basket. I chose to actually just die cut this basket out of colored cardstock. I'm using mustard cardstock, actually one of my favorite color cardstocks from Hero Arts. I'm going to again cut the basket free from the rest of the cardstock, and then I'll grab my craft knife again and also cut out that little negative space in between the handles. And once we get that little bit of cardstock removed, we're ready to actually adhere that basket on to our white basket. But before we do that, we do have our dishes to address. So I did die cut that picnic blanket out one more time out of Dove White cardstock, and now I'm just going to fussy cut all of these little dishes free. You may have noticed that when I did the gingham pattern on the blanket, I went right over where the dishes were. It was just easier to create that pattern if I wasn't trying to avoid the dishes. And by die cutting these or fussy cutting these dishes out, they're going to be they're going to be cleaner and also have a little bit of dimension because they're on top of the blanket. That'll just be more realistic looking overall. So we're almost done here, finishing up with that last little cup and saucer, and then we'll be ready to adhere our dishes and that mustard basket on top of our white cardstock base. To adhere these down, I'm going to grab my Hero Arts Precision Glue, just add a little bit to the top of first that white basket, and then I'll add a bit onto where those plates and dishes are on that gingham blanket, and then just stick down our white dishes on top. Now we'll move on to kind of starting to construct this card. I'm going to start with an A2 panel of mist cardstock, and I'm going to adhere it onto the front of an A2 top folding Dove White card base. Once I stick that down, and then I'm going to grab my Misty here because we're going to stamp our sentiment. But to make sure we get that sentiment, the placement of that sentiment right, I'm going to kind of construct my scene here real quickly. I'm not going to actually stick these down yet, just in case I somehow mess up my sentiment or get any of that ink on the layers of the scene. So once I have my sentiment in the right place, I picked it up with my Misty. Now I'm going to heat emboss this, so I am going to apply some anti-static powder first, and then we're going to ink this up in Hero Arts Embossing Watermark ink, and then we'll dip it into some white embossing powder. This white sentiment will really help to incorporate our white frame and just kind of make the colors more cohesive. So after I dipped into the powder, I tapped off the excess, and I'm just going to quickly heat set with my heat tool. And this sentiment is from the clear stamp set included in both kits. The classic and the premium. Now we're going to start putting some of our scene elements together. First, starting with the water, we're going to adhere that down to our card front. Then I'm going to move on to, I make a little mistake here. I start adding glue to the white frame, but before I can stick that white frame onto the kind of foresty scene, I have to actually glue down our blanket and basket, because that frame will overlap them a little bit. So I quickly, before I stuck that down, I caught that mistake, glued the basket and the blanket down, and I do have the chair off camera that we will adhere that later. I'm just double checking that everything looks like it's in the right spot and the chair looks like it's at the right angle. And now we're ready to kind of build up the sides of our scene. I just have some scrap cardstock here, and I'm just adhering it around the edges of the scene, anywhere except for where the water is. This is just going to make sure when we adhere this top panel with our picnic scene that it's nice and level, just because if we didn't do this, we'd have only the bottom half lifted up because of the water. And this just kind of makes things a little bit neater and tidier. So I went ahead and added some foam adhesive to the back side of our top panel, stuck it down to our card front, and now we're almost done. I'm going to grab some more scrap cardstock, cut a little square of it to fit behind the chair. Again, this is just to kind of give a tiny bit more dimension to that chair, so it's a little bit more balanced with the blanket that it's going to be resting next to. And then I added a little bit of foam adhesive to the chair as well, and then we'll just tuck that or place that on top of the water right next to the chair legs, and that'll actually complete the card. I'll hold it to the camera here so you get a good look at this really pretty picnic scene. I love how clean it looks with the colored cardstock, and just the little details that we added by Copic coloring the chair and the blanket just kind of adds depth and texture to this scene. Hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.